So we're going to begin with a few letters of the Rebbe that deal with finding my purpose in life and how to judge my success or failure in a true way without it getting me down, but nevertheless in a way that can motivate me for growth.
Excuse me, Rabbi, may I just ask a question?
Sure.
If you would, like to do this, it's fine. But if you would like to reschedule it so at a time when perhaps more people could come, I'm welcome to that too.
Others should join us soon.
Okay,
and
good.
I'm recording it anyway, so that's perfect. Thank you, though.
Okay.
And if one person is here, that's wonderful. Okay. So this is a letter that a 12, 13-year-old boy wrote to the Rebbe in 1958. And the boy was a smart kid, a serious kid, but reading Jewish history and reading stories in the Talmud, you read about these geniuses, about these prodigies that at a young age had accomplished so much. And this boy was thinking, I'll never be the best in the world. I'll never be in the top. Look at all these people that were proficient in all these different fields at a very young age. Where am I? What am I? Here's the letter the child writes. And the Rebbe responds. The Rebbe says, greeting and blessing. What's interesting is that the Rebbe responds to him, taking him very seriously, a 12, 13-year-old boy. The Rebbe writes, in response to your letter dated Adar 15, which is Shushan Purim, in which you write about your spiritual condition and ask for advice in this regard. The Rebbe first says, you'll find the answers to all your questions in the book Tanya, which I'm sure you have. The Tanya is a book that was written by the first Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Shneir Zalman. And he spent years talking to people and helping guide them through their spiritual crises and helping them reach levels of attainment in refinement and in finding their mission in life and overcoming challenges. And he said, I'm going to take all that knowledge and all that practical advice and put it into a book. And he spent many years working on this book, and it's become known as the Bible of Hasidism because it includes within it how to live a life, the behavior of what is needed to be able to accomplish your spiritual goals and overcome all challenges. And many of the other hundreds of books of Hasidic thought that come out of it, so to speak, have a base or allusion in this work. So this work is a practical guide of spiritual service called the Tanya. So it's a work of mysticism, but also one of practical mysticism. The Rebbe's telling this 13-year-old boy, I'm sure you have the book, and I trust that your edition also has the index, which will help you in your search. As a matter of fact, the Rebbe himself was the one who put together the index to make it easier to find the topics because many of the ideas are spread out throughout the work. Now, in response to your question regarding what is written and told about those that at a very young age were already renowned as prodigies and great Torah scholars. And this boy is intimidated by it. And you read these stories like these kids at 9 years old, or where I'll be when I'm 80. I'll never reach their level. Number one is, Rebbe says, and this has to do with when we look at other people to define our spiritual, intellectual, moral growth. When we're looking at others, number one is, what is the point in questioning why no two minds are the same? It is a fact of nature. Just as our faces are not the same, our minds are not the same. This is how God creates the world. So asking that sort of question when it's something which is so basic is, first of all, is not appropriate. The fact is, there's always going to be those that know more, those that know less, those that are smarter, those that are less so. Or number one. Number two, especially in light of what's explained in the 4th chapter of the Tanya, that a person's understanding of Torah depends on two things: the extent of their mental capacity and the supernal root of their soul. Human beings are given different intellectual capabilities, but to understand God's word is not just the mind, it's also the soul. And some people have a more refined, holier soul than others. So somebody who's born with that ability, that unique talent, you're born with it. Now, this means that some people have a better capability than others. As the Tanya explains, and this is a very important teaching, when the mission of the oral tradition says, be humble before every person. How can I be humble before every person? How can I be humble before every person? There are people that I'm better than. There are people that are squandering their resources. There are people that are not living up to the potential. Why shouldn't I have some ego and feel I'm better than someone else? And the Tanya explains like this: every person possesses a quality in which they are greater than their fellow. Everybody has something unique. And everyone has a deficiency in some area, and everyone has a superiority in one area. As a matter of fact, when I look at another person, I'm supposed to look with two lenses. Let's say he's doing very well. So I can feel distraught. Look how great that person is. But I have to look at myself and say, wait, you have some qualities which are uniquely yours that you can do well in. In addition, if I see somebody fail, I can say, wait, if they have this challenge that they're failing, God does not give a camel more than it can carry. This means everybody who stumbles and fails has the ability to overcome it. As a matter of fact, when someone is faced with a challenge, that means they have an incredible power to overcome. The story told of a man who was struggling with an issue. He was raised in a traditional background, and he knew he should marry someone Jewish, but he'd become involved, and he'd gone to different rabbis and rebbes to ask for advice, and nothing resonated with him. When he came to the rebbe and told him the story, the rebbe said, I'm jealous of you. The man said, what do you mean you're jealous? The rebbe said, if God gave you this temptation and he didn't give it to me, that means you have the ability to overcome this challenge and make sure that your children are Jewish and they give you the change. In other words, the fact that you have the challenge, that itself means you have the power to overcome it. So be humble before every person is by those who are failing as well as those who are succeeding. But what it also means is the flip side, that there are ways in which you have something unique to offer. In a similar fashion, the Tanya notes that even our success in any given mitzvah is because it so arose in the divine will. In other words, with all of our struggles that we strain for and we try to accomplish, there's an element of divine destiny there as well. Now comes back to a much bigger issue. The Rebbe says, I'm surprised by your entire attitude. Something even more. So the first idea is everybody is different. And not just everyone's different when it comes to understanding Torah, there are things beyond your control. And then we say be humble for every person means everybody has something that the other person doesn't have. Each one of us is a hook and eye, where we have something to give someone else, and we have something where someone can give us. The fact that right now in life I need something from somebody just means that a future time I'm going to give something to somebody else. In other words, the fact that I have a lack is the natural state of all creatures, particularly human beings, that there are ways that we can give and ways that we receive. So, but now he said, I'm surprised by your entire attitude. You're missing the point. There's a story told of a man who came to the first Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, and spoke to him in this private meeting about all the things he wants from God. And the Rebbe said, you spent a lot of time thinking about what you want from God, but have you what you need from God? But have you thought about what you were needed for? Why are you here in the first place? Have you thought about that? And the man fainted, and he took it to heart. But this idea, ask not what your country could do for you, ask what you could do for your country, is said about everything in our lives. Is that if we're here for a purpose and a mission, so the fact that right now you want something different and you want it to be a different way, that may not be your mission. A person's purpose in life is not to surpass and be greater than someone else. It's not about you being better than someone else. Rather, as the mission states, I was created to serve my Creator. God made me for a purpose. And this purpose is expressed in me serving my Creator. If God desires that one person should achieve greatness in the midst of charity, and another should achieve greatness in Torah learning, and so on, then each should fulfill the divine purpose for which they were designated. If a soldier on the front line decides that he wants to be a spy, and he goes across the lines and he starts acting like a spy, he'll be shot for being a deserter. In other words, your mission is why you're here. It's not for you to decide on your own. Oh, I'd rather be a drummer. You're right now a soldier. You don't get to choose. Now, this is not to keep people locked up in any form of mission chosen from something, from society or from something else, but rather where you find yourself with your abilities, that is your mission. There's no bemoaning, why am I where I find myself? Where I find myself with my skills and my abilities right now is my mission. Can I refine that? Sure. Should I? Of course. Keep on sharpening the blade. There's no question. We should always work on becoming better at what we do. But the fact is a recognition that God, the creator of all, guides the footsteps of men and puts you in the place where you're supposed to be and gives you a mission and gives you the tools. And that is why you're there. It's not better for you to decide, oh, I'm going to go be, take a new role and go do what you don't have, so to speak, the tools for. It's not about that, or even looking over and saying, oh, that's what I should be doing, and wasting your potential for what you can do. Takes it a bit further. Obviously, all this applies. Now, here's a challenge. Sometimes a person could say, you know, I'm good at this one thing. I'm really good at giving charity, but prayer is not my thing. Study is not my thing. Jewish ritual is not my thing. And we say, wait a second. Everyone does have a unique mission in life based on your talents and abilities. But everyone is also given a covenant of all 613 commandments. The question really is, in what do you shine? In what do you focus on most? Your talents, your abilities, and your focus has to be and should be in where you can feel good about it, where you can contribute, where you have the extra skills. But it's not about all or nothing. It's a general mission that every one of us shares. And then there's the particular mission that you or I have. So this is only a question of where a person should place their priority and energy. Because every Jew is obligated in all 613 commandments. And in the study of Torah, which we say in our daily prayers, is the equivalent of them all. This 13-year-old boy ends up becoming a dean of a yeshiva, where today, you know, he teaches many students. But as a 13-year-old boy, you see already, despite his concern that he wouldn't be a scholar like others before, Rebbe alludes to possibly that Torah, which is equivalent to them all, does become his unique mission in life in his own way with his own students. So this idea that God guides the footsteps of man, God gives us the potential, God gives us the tools. We have to hone them. And we do have to discover what it is that is our mission in life Sometimes we're thrown into circumstances that present what our mission is in life. Other times we find ourselves through a study or other opportunities that we end up with a skill and a job. And sometimes these things all flip over. We may find that we have another mission. God is guiding our footsteps. We want it to be in kindness and mercy, but everywhere we are is where we're meant to be. And then the question is, how do we fulfill our mission here? And we know the general map, 613, but then each situation, each individual has a part of the world, a part of their soul that is linked. We say in our part at the end of our daily prayers, that the Holy One, blessed be, he wished to make the people of Israel meritorious. Therefore, he gave them Torah and mitzvot in abundant measure. The Hebrew word for meritorious also can mean shine, lizakos, to purify. And the idea is God wanted us to purify ourselves, so he gave us many opportunities, many commandments. There's one with your name on it that can be what you are uniquely involved in, what your skills are best meant for. Okay, then the Rebbe says a PS, and he would write this to many people. And I trust you know the daily study schedule for Chumash Tilman Tanya. And what's unique about this schedule, it's the same for everybody. In other words, there's a general. In any case, be diligent in the following them from here on. Also make sure to give a few cents to charity each weekday morning before prayer. That's something each one of us can do. And then you never know what your mission will be. Things may come your way. And you have to find your strength as well. Just a little overview here. The Tanya has both philosophical and mystical teachings, but also it's a psychological, spiritual, psychological self-help guide. There's a story told of a Seder with a third of Chabad Rebbe. For the middle matzah, we break it at the Passover Seder. Half, the larger half, we put away for Afikomen to be eaten at the end of the meal. So we go to sleep with a taste of freedom in our mouth. And the smaller half stays peeking out of the matzah cover for us to tell the story over what's called the answering bread, the lechem oni that is sticking out there, the poor man's bread. The custom is that we put the larger one aside for the afikomen. It once happened at the Seder that the matzah was broken by one of the participants, and he's trying to figure out which one is bigger. And he's asking his friend, which is bigger? Which is the greater one? And the Tzemach Tzedek said, a great one that you have to measure is not truly great. Which on a simple level means if they're not distinctively great, then they're not truly great. But on another level can be said as meaning, if you have to measure compared to someone else, that's not a true measure. A true measurement is intrinsic. There's a story that an aphorism that from the Kutzker Rebbe, Menachem Mendel of Kutsk used to say, if I am I, because I am not you, and you are you, because you are not me, then I am not I, and you are not you. If we define ourselves based on others, that's not a true definition of self. One of the great challenges is when we're looking at somebody else and finding ourselves short. Now, if we see someone working hard on themselves and striving, that for sure is something to emulate and to be jealous of, so to speak, be envious of someone who's working on themselves. But if they have certain tools in their tool chest naturally, that's not something you can be jealous of. The way Maimonides puts it, it's like someone wishing, why am I not a star? Why am I not a planet? In other words, you're a human being. You were given certain gifts, and this is what you have. The question is what you do with what you are given. This is not a question of what you do, who dies with the most toys wins, who accomplishes the most. It's not that. It's a race against yourself. What are you going to do with the tools that God gave you? And God gave you tools and opportunities in abundant measure of changing yourself, changing your family, changing your people you come in contact with, influencing, enlightening. These are all things we can do, each one in our own way. Sometimes just with a pleasant smile is something that can be done. Of course, the harder we work, there's always ways that we can do more. The story told, an aphorism that Reb Zishim Anapoli said, if I was given the choice to exchange places with the patriarch Abraham, I would decline the offer. I could be Abraham. I'd say, no, thank you. Because what would God gain from that? You still have one Abraham and one Zisha. Just because I would feel better than I am in the higher echelons of spiritual life, that's not what it's about. God wanted Abraham, God wanted a Zisha. The question is, what am I doing as Zisha? On his deathbed, Reb Zisha, he was weeping, and his student said to Reb Zisha, why do you weep? To us, you were like Abraham. To us, you were like Moses. What are you afraid of? Death? I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid that when I get to heaven, they're not going to say to me, Zisha, why weren't you Abraham? I'm afraid they're going to say, Zisha, why weren't you Zisha? Why weren't, as the saying goes, all you can be? Why didn't you use your talents and gifts that God gave you to the fullest extent? That's the only question we have. Am I using my time and my talents, not your talents, to the greatest degree possible? That's one letter of the Rebbe. Here's another letter of the Rebbe. Greetings and blessings. Shalom Avracha. I have duly received your letter of the 8th of Shvat, but this is the first opportunity to answer. Should there be any good news in the meantime, you will no doubt let me know. The Rebbe used to always say, please give me the good news. So many people call the Rebbe with bad news and struggles and issues, but we always wanted to hear when the problems were resolved or good things had come about. The Rebbe says, you seem to be disturbed because you feel that you have not attained the proper level of Torah mitzvot and cannot see the tachlis, the purpose, which makes you downhearted. Leaving the details of your complaints aside, I wish to make several observations. Number one, a feeling of dissatisfaction with oneself is a good sign, for it indicates vitality and an urge to rise and improve oneself, which is accomplished in a two-way method. There are two ways. Withdrawal from the present state. In other words, if you're doing something negative and you're living in a negative environment, you remove yourself from that negative behavior and turn into a higher state. Turn away from evil and do good. You're not happy with yourself, that's a good thing. Dissatisfaction, a recognition of non-complacency, is a key to growth. But it shouldn't be a self-indulgent one. It shouldn't be one that leads you to pity and to wallowing in self-pity. He says here, if the urge to improve oneself does not lead to change, but rather to downheartedness and inertia where you're wallowing, hey, I'm a failure, then that's not from the good inclination. That's from the evil inclination. That's from the side that wants to pull you down. And if you go along with that and you're feeling holy, oh, I regret of all my bad deeds, that's not holy. That's not holy. Holiness is only regret that leads to change. Holiness that leads to self-pity or self-loathing. Regret that leads to self-loathing or self-pity is not holy. It's just another plot of the evil inclination, whose job it is, and does his job faithfully, is to use every means to prevent the Jew from carrying out good intentions connected with Torah mitzvahs. This false and misleading voice of the Yetzer Hara should be stifled and ignored. People think, oh, I'm being religious, I'm being good because I'm full of regrets. Regrets are not holy. What's holy is if it leads to change. If it doesn't, it's the opposite of holy. And you have to know the difference. If it's pulling me down, it's bad. If it's lifting me up and motivating me, it's good. So one has to be very, very, very careful to push away with two hands remorse that comes about cloaked in a garb of piety, but really is just to leave you in a state of inertia. This is a very important step in spiritual growth. In addition, the Alter Rebbe said you don't have to feel down and crushed by right now your present state of not accomplishing. Because even if it's 100% true that you've squandered your resources and your abilities over the last week, month, year, decade, each one, whatever it may be, we know something. Every good act, every mitzvah that we did has created an eternal bond with God, the eternal. In other words, a mitzvah is forever. Diamonds are not forever. Mitzvahs are forever. When I do a mitzvah, I create a bond that even later, when I move away and I wander off the proper path, that bond with the infinite God above time and space is still there. So there's no room for despondency. Not just there's no room, it's a stumbling block in the worship of God. As the Tanya explains, serve God with joy. Regard to your other question or lack of understanding of the tachlis, what's the purpose of it all? The important thing that required of every Jew is contained in the words of the Torah. Ki karov elecha hadavar ma'od v'ficha ulevavcha v'asosa. For the thing is very nigh unto you, says the Torah, in your mouth to speak of it, in your heart to think of it. And the ultimate is to do it. We're judged by what we do, not what we think and feel, although those are important components of the doing. But ultimately, it's about what you do. Understanding is generally the second step. So do what's right. Do what you know is right. Learn to know what is right. The first step is the practice of the mitzvahs. And get to learn Torah, be able to do that, of course. My prayerful wish to you as you conclude your letter is that the next one coming from you will be more cheerful. With blessings, the Rebbe. Remember you in prayer for the fulfillment of your heart's desires for good. So the Rebbe says, I see you're making progress. I'm going to paraphrase some of this. And there's always room for advancement in all matters of goodness and holiness. Torah and mitzvahs, which are infinite, being derived from and connect with the infinite. And every additional effort in this direction also brings additional divine blessings. So this idea of constant growth, to be human is to grow. And there's no question the Rebbe was always pushing his followers to grow, and everyone he encountered. Someone came and told the Rebbe that the Jewish Federation in New York is giving $1 million for Jewish education. And the Rebbe said to the head of the Federation, you think I'm going to be satisfied with $1 million for Jewish education? There's room for growth. In other words, at any time, he would push people to push themselves and to push the people they were working with. There's always room for growth. But don't let it get you down. You still have to be joyous that you accomplished. And the fact that you didn't do and accomplish as much as you would have liked to, with the gifts that God gave you, and we do fall short, it should just be used as an impetus of making a commitment to growing in some way. The Rebbe says, I'd like to point out that in addition to taking upon, when you take upon yourself an additional effort in Torah and mitzvot, it should be without the force of a vow. Believe negative. You make a vow in Judaism is a very stringent thing. It's something we're very cautious about. It says how it becomes, it can be a negative thing if we break it. So anytime we make a commitment, we say without the force of a vow. B'li neder. Will you make it tomorrow? B'li neder, without a vow. Then the Rebbe says, with general reference to request for guidance as how to fulfill your purpose in life, particularly in the light of the Hasidic teaching which we cite in your letter, the general guideline has already been given in the Mishnah. I was created to serve my Creator. That's why I'm here, which is to do Torah and mitzvah. Or in the words of Hasidic thought, which amounts to the same thing, to make for the Almighty, for the Holy One, blessed to be He, a dwelling place in the lower realm. By us using physical material things, by putting up a mezuzah on our door, by giving charity, by praying, by helping others, by keeping kosher. We make a dwelling place for God in the most mundane physical world, which is what it's all about. As explained here in its Hasidic discourses at great length. And then the Rebbe adds, we need help. We can't always do it alone. You should have a companion with whom to discuss matters of Judaism from time to time. A buddy. The text in the Mishnah is acquire for yourself a companion, which literally means like buy yourself a friend, which follows make for yourself a teacher. So there's a value in having a guide, like a teacher, to help you, but also in a practical note, someone who's in a similar journey to yourself. It's good to have others who are going through it. A study partner in morality and ethics, a study partner in spiritual growth, where you work together or you communicate together. The Rebbe says it's called an acquisition by yourself, which means sometimes there's an expense of time and energy and effort in getting yourself a true friend that can go on the journey with you together. Of course, it's not binding. And if it's not after your heart, you find a more suitable one. And this is a very important thing. Be able to have fellow travelers who will not look at you with pity or with not understanding your struggle, but someone who you can talk to honestly and open-hearted and help you along and help each other along. You help them and they help you. And this is the idea of a friend to discuss these things. A teacher is more a mentor, which is important to have as well. Every one of us should have. Okay, here's another letter. This is a letter for someone that has more of a communal obligation. And this communal obligation is she's a student and she's in college and she's part of a group. This is in 1951, a precursor maybe to Hillel at the NYU, was called the Jewish Culture Foundation. And they had visited with the Rebbe and they had questions, and the Rebbe wrote her a letter. He says, any thinking person must frequently ask himself, what is my life's purpose? This question occurs more frequently with greater force in the minds of the studying youth, who dedicate a number of their best years to study in preparation for the future life lying still full ahead of them. Moreover, adolescents have uncapped resources of energy and enthusiasm that eagerly desire to put to good advantage. To them, the question of the life's purpose is more urgent and vital than people of maturer years. The fact is, when you have responsibilities that weigh down on you, sometimes we stop thinking and we're just living in these circumstances. We're trying to, not drown. The young, when they're studying in particular, where the levels of responsibilities are limited, so why am I here is the great question. And they have the energy and enthusiasm to put it to good advantage, which they want to use. So us Jews, the people of the book, now although the people of the book, it was formulated by not a Jewish source, it comes from the Quran, the question is still of great importance. We're still defined by the people of the book, of the Torah. The meaning of the epithet is not merely that we're a book, people of education and learning in general, because the book refers to Torah, with which we are identified. Torah, the Hebrew word Torah means two things, instruction and guidance. For the Torah is our guide in life. So this is who we are. God did not make a world where every rule, every element in nature, every cell has rules and parameters through which it works. Except the human being doesn't have a rule. No, the human being has a guidebook. And the guidebook was a subject of revelation. And every human being has a mission that is put out by the Torah. For non-Jews, there are no idle laws. For Jews, the 613 commandments. The Torah makes us constantly aware of our duties in life. It gives a true definition of our life's purpose, and it shows us the ways and means of attaining this goal. The life's purpose of every Jew, man or woman, has been clearly defined as far back as the revelation at Mount Sinai, more than 32 and a half, and now we're talking about 3,300 years ago, when we received the divine Torah and became a nation. We were then ordained to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. In Hebrew, the word Kohen, a priest, means to serve. So what does this mean? It means each one of us has to be holy in our own private life, but in our association with the outside world, when we act with others, every one of us, man or woman, must fulfill priestly function. What does a priest do? In ancient biblical time, the priest's function is to bring God to the people and to elevate the people to be nearer to God. This dual motion of elevating the people and drawing down, revealing godliness by teaching and guiding was what the Kohen did in biblical Israel. In a similar fashion, every Jew and Jewess fulfills their personal and priestly duties by living a life according to the Torah. But what is my duty to others? The extent of one's duty is in direct proportion to one's station in life. It all the greater in the case of an individual who occupies a position of some prominence, which gives him or her, like this student the Rebbe is writing to, an opportunity to exercise influence over others, especially over our youth. Every one of us, the Rebbe said at other times, is a teacher to somebody. There's somebody in somewhere in something where we can give. And we're meant to give. In a place where it's clear, so the obligation and the yoke becomes that much greater, and the opportunity. Such persons must fully appreciate the privilege and responsibility which divine providence vested in them to spread the light of the Torah and to fight darkness wherever and wherever form it may rear its head. This is your duty and privilege as one of the student officers in relation to your co-religionist colleagues and student body in general. I would also like to convey this message to your colleagues in the Jewish Cultural Foundation. You're all no doubt aware of this, but perhaps there's room for added emphasis and the conviction that this is a quote from his father-in-law. It cannot be otherwise. Now, the idea of commitment means you know what you're supposed to do, and different it can't be. I have to do what's right, no matter what the obstacle is. He says here, no Jewish individual ought to be satisfied with the fact that as far as he personally is concerned, he's doing his best to improve himself. He owes it to the next fellow to help him prove himself too. We do not, no man is an island in mission too. It is true you have to worry about yourself, but coupled with that, you have to worry about your fellow. How do I, as love of one's fellow, bring them closer to the divine and help them improve themselves? So he says here, nor should discouragement or a spirit of defeatism be permitted to creep into one's mind, such as, what can I do? I'm alone in the field. This was a girl in the 1950s in college campuses. To be a Jew was something in most places people were hiding. She's trying to bring it to the fore. She feels alone. Rebbe says her father Abraham was all alone. He was called the Ivri, the man from the other side of the Jordan, because he stood on one side of the world and everyone else was on the other side. And he pulled and he pulled and he influenced. How did he do that? For father, he was Abraham. He inherited all the earth, it says. In other words, one man, one person. Don't be intimidated. The Rebbe says in every situation we can meditate and see that it is not quality but quantity. Our age, which some people prefer to call the atomic age, has further demonstrated that the minutest quantity of matter has tremendous stores in the minutest quantity of matter, tremendous stores of energy may be found. That's the whole idea of splitting the atom. All that is necessary is to discover them and then harness these stores of energy to constructive purposes and not, God forbid, otherwise. This is another element the Rebbe would say we learn from the fact that one child can put his finger on the button. If the nuclear football is given to a kid and the button is put in his hand, he could, God forbid, cause destruction. So too, there's this ability for us to cause salvation to come about. That it is not about being many. One person alone can influence the person next to him, next to her, and that itself can tip the scales of good. In light of the motto often used by my late father-in-law, blessed memory, that a Jew innately neither desires to nor can be severed from God. There's a unique quality we find among the Jewish people. There are many people who have given up their life for what they believe in. Give me liberty or give me death. There are many who have given up. But the Jew is unique historically. That even a Jew who felt disconnected from his or her heritage, when push came to shove, they would give up their life rather than worship idols, convert to another religion. Why? Because innately, even a secular Jew who professes his lack of connection has an innate connection. And we see that all the time. People define themselves as Jews, although they don't believe in religion. So what makes you a Jew? You don't even like the filter fish. What is it? Biologically? Not necessarily. Your grandparents could have been converts. So you're choosing a religion and you don't believe in religion. Because innately, Judaism is a family that's defined by God in the Torah. So it's a family of bonding, but already defined by the words of the Torah, by the religion. And the idea, though, is that a Jew innately cannot cut himself off from that. He may not be aware why. So the Rebbe says, I'm sure these thoughts will find a proper response in your heart and the hearts of your colleagues and friends. I think I have one or two more letters and then a short video. Okay, yes. So this is a longer letter and then a short video. Our sages said, each and every soul was in the presence of his divine majesty before coming to the earth. Under God's throne of glory, the souls were hewn under the seat of glory. Somehow, whatever a soul is and whatever God's throne is, the soul comes from that place, in the highest of the highs. These sayings emphasize that the essential nature of the soul, its holiness and purity, and it's completely divorced from anything material and physical. The soul itself, innately, by its very nature, is not subject to any material desires or temptations. For the soul exists disembodied, separate from the body, separate from the suit of flesh and bones and blood that we wear, and mind, brain, blood, all those things, the soul exists on high without those limitations. But when the soul, through the act of God, merges with the body, it has temptations from the physical body and what we call the animal soul. Nevertheless, God's will was that the soul, which is a portion of the divine above, hewn from his throne, should descend into the physical and coarse world, where it has all sorts of strange desires, materialism, physical things, and maybe even bad things, and be confined within and united with a physical body for scores of years, in a state which is absolutely repulsive to its very nature, to the soul. The soul doesn't need to eat or drink, and this whole thing of being involved in the physical world is separate from what the soul likes. However, its ultimate fulfillment is only through engagement in the physical world. The physical world is a means to an end. How so? All this for the purpose of a divine mission, which the soul has to fulfill, to purify and spiritualize the physical body and the related physical environment. How? By permeating them with the light of God, so as to make this world an abode of the Shekhinah and your body. You use your body to put on tefillin, to light Shabbat candles, to eat kosher, all to make a blessing. All these things is elevating the world around you and your actual physical body, controlling your temper, making yourself think in a positive, joyous way. All these things is making you, refining you, and perfecting you, which is why you're here. The only way a Jew can do this is through a life of Torah and mitzvahs. There's no other way to change your body in a way to fit and morph into the state it's supposed to be, a divine state. Because God tells us what the ingredients, and there are 613 mitzvot and Torah study. When the soul fulfilled this mission, all the transient pain and suffering connected with the soul's descent and life on this earth are not only justified, but infinitely outweighed by the great reward and everlasting bliss which the soul enjoys thereafter. From the above, this is just for the individual, that everything you're going to achieve is done through the soul coming to the body. From the above, one can easily appreciate the extent of the tragedy of disregarding this soul mission on earth. For in doing so, one condemns the soul to a term of useless suffering. The soul does not enjoy this physical world. My body does, my animal soul does, but the godly, holy, pristine soul is put into a very uncomfortable exile and prison, surrounded by muck for it, which is my physical life. And if I don't live a life of purpose and meaning, you torture your soul. The suffering is not compensated for, nor nullified, because you're not going to get the everlasting happiness which God had intended for the soul if you don't use your life in the proper manner. Rather, says sadly, even when there are brief moments of religious activity, the study of Torah and the practice of mitzvahs, it is sad to contemplate how often such activity is tainted by the lack of real enthusiasm and inner joy, not realizing that these are the activities that justify existence. Why am I here? I'm here to uplift the body. Instead, I'm doing the opposite. I'm degrading the soul further, God forbid, by acting not just in a selfish, self-centered way, which is bad enough, but even in a bad way at times. So I'm losing the plot. I'm like, if the United States had invested in a spaceship to reach the most outer reaches of the universe, to land on Mars or whatever it may be, and the astronaut decides to take it somewhere else, a joyride, to show off to his friends as he goes around the globe, that would be a disaster. He's playing around with the billions of dollars, the thousands of hours and energy that so many people have put into. For what? For nonsense. In a similar fashion, God invests to make a world. So aside from missing the vital point to take failure, taking advantage of the opportunity to fulfill God's will, forfeiting the everlasting benefits we derive therefrom, it is contrary to sound reason to choose that side of life, which accentuates enslavement and degradation of the soul, while rejecting the good that is inherent in it, namely the great ascent that's to come from the soul's descent. Why am I here? To lift up the body, not to be further imprisoned by the body or to imprison the soul even more. It will now become clear what our sages meant, that no person commits a sin unless he is stricken with temporary insanity. Because it doesn't take profound thinking to realize that the fact that God pushes us into this world, life is compulsory. You don't choose it. And the soul, which is part of the divine above, comes into a frame of dust and acid, the human body. So the proper thing to do for your life is to live a life of purpose in which every aspect is permeated by Torah and mitzvahs. And only that life makes this possible. It's also clear that God, who's the essence of goodness, compels the soul to come from the highest heights of heaven down to the lowest depths. If he's doing that for the purpose to study Torah and mitzvahs, how great is the value of Torah and mitzvahs? That's why he made the whole world and why he's sending you down and taking the soul from its warm, comfortable, holy, ensconced place in the cocoon of heaven and putting it into a cold, dark, dreary world. Furthermore, the descent of the soul for the purpose of ascent shows there's no other way to obtain the objective except through the soul's descent to live on this earth. If there were an easier way, God would not compel the soul to descend from the sublime heights of the seat of glory down to the netherworld, the lowest of all worlds. And I would add, the Rebbe speaks in other places, any challenge I'm facing in my life right now is somehow from the ultimate good of God that is giving me some good that I would otherwise never be able to achieve. By recognizing that, and by that will help lift you out from a state of feeling sad about your situation in life. Because where you are is where you're meant to be. And now the question is, okay, where do I go from here? Although, of course, we do recognize moral choice has a role and bad mistakes we've made that pull us down. Nevertheless, now that we're here, the question is, let me do another mitzvah. Let me live a life of purpose and meaning. For only here in the lowest depths can the soul attain its highest ascent, higher even than angels. As our sages say, the righteous receive the foremost angels. Reflecting upon the greatness of Torah and mitzvah, specifically pertaining to this life, reflecting also the Torah and mitzvot are the only means to attain the soul's perfection and fulfill the divine purpose, one will experience a sense of real joy at his fate and destiny, despite the many difficulties and handicaps from within and without, which are inevitable on this earth. Part of life are challenges. Everyone has challenges, some more than others. Somehow you were given the power to overcome these challenges. But with this understanding that you have, that all of the temporary challenges are worth it for the ultimate infinite good that comes at the end of the train, we can live up to the injunction, serve God with joy, which the Baal Shem Tov made one of the foundations of the teaching, in which he expounded at length the Chabad thought, as pointed out by the Alter Rebbe, whose liberation we celebrate on the 19th of Tislev in his monumental work, The Time.